Hi, this is 100 in 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Today, we are looking at Unearthing Mars 2, The Ancient War. Unearthing Mars 2 is a first-person shooter that is out of this world. Actually, it starts on Earth and makes its way to Mars and then back to Earth. You are going to play this game as the memory of a scientist from long ago, and it is definitely going to take you on a mental trip as you try to figure out what exactly is real to you as the player and what was just a figment of the imagination and memory of the character that you're living the memories through. So let's jump into this game. In our VR Gear game reviews, we like to cover as many aspects of the game as possible so that you can make an informed decision before you try or buy one of these VR titles. Unearthing Mars 2 is no exception, and we're excited to share the details of this one with you today. All right, so first let's talk about getting up and running with Unearthing Mars 2. The download file is about 7 gigabytes, and so this is going to take a good amount of time on slower internet connections, so go grab yourself a snack while it's downloading, and when you come back, hopefully it's done. Once the download completes, you'll be able to start the game up and jump right in. The opening sequence of the game was somewhat disorienting, but you start as a co-pilot in a spaceship that is approaching Earth after a long mission to Mars. You are sitting in the embodied co-pilot. Also, as part of the introductory scene, you hear the voice of a former colleague who was absorbed by some sort of mystic crystal that they encountered while on Mars. The scene cuts, and then you find yourself in a lab surrounded by your other colleagues who are curious about the voices you've been hearing for the last 9 years. Then the gameplay starts, or you think it does, because that's when the tutorial begins and you learn how to navigate the world. So getting up and running in this game, it takes some time to get into normal gameplay. There's a lot to learn, a lot of backstory to cover, but once you get into it, you'll be able to start shooting the enemies in no time. So have some patience as you work through the introductory parts of this game. This game is a first-person shooter with a sci-fi twist. It's also a sort of puzzle game. Similar to a choose-your-own-adventure, depending on the path you choose, you might hit a dead end and it will be game over for you. But if you pick the right path, you'll be able to progress through the levels. It takes some trial and error to figure out the right paths because there isn't someone telling you which way you should and should not go. But this first-person shooter, adventure, sci-fi puzzle game is one that will intrigue you, and learning all the different gameplay interactions is really intriguing and quite engaging. You play this game for the most part from a first-person perspective, but there's a twist. It's not your perspective, it is a perspective of somebody else's memory. So the game starts with you observing the character that you ultimately become. You do play as the person, so gameplay is first person, but the story is third person or second person if that's a thing. But you'll proceed through the story and all the levels in a first-person manner, just like any other first-person shooter. The theme of this game is space exploration and uncovering the history of the Earth and Mars and the interaction between the two planets as life moved back and forth between the two. Apparently, the ancient wars happened a long time ago, or they happened in the future and a long time ago for them, which would be the present or maybe our future. The timelines are a little confusing. We didn't play the first Unearthing Mars game, so we don't know the full backstory, but this game does start with you as a co-pilot, and you make your way back to Earth to uncover what in the world happened while you were on Mars. There's a very strong story. The gameplay follows the story plot line, and you can tell that the theme is overcoming space aliens, robots with laser guns to make your way to the ultimate objective, which is to collect information and to learn more about what happened at this certain facility long ago. So the control input for this game actually got pretty frustrating. We were using the Valve Index, and the game says it supports the Valve Index, but as we worked through the tutorial, there was a lot of instructions that said we had to press on the left or the right, the top or the bottom of the touchpad. Well, if you have the Valve Index, you know that it's more of a slider for your thumb. It does detect directional input, but at one point the tutorial broke for us because it wouldn't receive the controller input to press on one side of the touchpad. and so the game just broke and fell apart. Now, to fix that, you can go into settings and change the controller bindings, which we weren't terribly excited about doing, but once you fix that, then you can go in and remap the different controls so the game can work properly. But these controls are crucial to successful gameplay, and the default does not work with the Valve Index. The music and sound of this game were what you would expect. There was a space vibe to it. There were lasers, kind of like a Star Wars type, space elevator type sound going on. The soundtrack to this game was appropriate. It matched. It got more intense when the gameplay got more intense, and it calmed down when you were looking at more of an instructional menu or hearing your guide tell you what to do next in the tutorial. The sound effects were what you would expect as well. These are taser guns, lasers firing, robots approaching and attacking you. The music and sound of this game were pretty well done, and we thought that it was great. The spatial audio worked as well. You would hear where people were coming from. Some games don't do that. The sound is just there, and you had to figure out through visual cues where people are coming from. But we found in this game, spatial audio was well done, and you could tell if someone was coming from left or right or potentially behind you. So music and sound, pretty well done. For player movement, this game can be played from the standing or sitting position, but you won't be moving from that position much in the game. You are able to rotate, but the majority of gameplay is done in front of you. The way that you move from one place to the next is by teleporting, but your direction is dictated by the game. You're able to pick different places that you'll teleport to, and the story has different outcomes when you do. But overall, the player movement is done by pointing your controller in the direction you would like to teleport, and the game will teleport you there, and you'll continue with gameplay from that new location, limiting your movement to be rotation or looking up or down with your headset. Because this game is set up like your traditional teleportation player movement type game, the motion sickness was kept to a minimum if you are familiar with the type of locomotion. The areas of the game that are somewhat disorienting are more of the introductory videos to different levels, as you're observing from a third-person perspective, somebody jumping off of a spaceship and you following them through the air, things like that. But actual gameplay, motion sickness is kept to a minimum because the game developers followed a lot of regular player movement paradigms like teleportation. The environment of this game and the level of immersion that you felt was kind of hit or miss, and that's because the game narrator kept reminding you that this wasn't something that your character was actually experiencing. You were experiencing the memory of somebody else. As a result, you kept wondering if the damage you were taking on was authentic or if it was just part of the scenario. So what this did was made you feel a little detached from the story, but not detached out of VR, detached out of the main character of the game. You felt more connected to the character that you actually were, and that was a person experiencing somebody else's memory. So you did feel immersed in VR. I'm not sure if you felt entirely immersed in the person's memory, but that was, I guess, the point of the game. All right, now let's talk about the scorecard for Unearthing Mars 2. This game was fun to play, but there were some issues with the controls, so let's go through each one of the scores in the scorecard. First, theme and story. There was a clear theme to this game, and that was space exploration, planet exploration, and there was a story that you were being pulled through as you progressed through the different levels. We're giving this game an 8 out of 10 for theme and story. For controls, this game had a lot of potential, and there's just a few things that need to be fixed, or maybe the entire controller binding for the index needs to be redone. But we're giving this game a very low score of a 3 out of 10 because the game became completely unplayable on the Valve Index because of the controller bindings. So that should be fixed and the score can improve, but right now a 3 out of 10 for controls. For music and sound, we are giving this game a 7 out of 10. That's a really good score, and the game developers did a really good job making sure that the music matched the gameplay and that the sound effects matched the different materials and the space that you were playing in. They also did a great job capturing where audio was coming from. So a 7 out of 10 for music and sound. For player movement in this game, we are giving a 6 out of 10. We're giving this score because traditional player movement was used very effectively. However, with the level of VR that we're at today, a lot more is possible, and the game developers didn't take advantage of that, and so there are some points deducted for it. So a 6 out of 10 for player movement. For motion sickness, this game is going to get the high score of an 8 out of 10. There was very minimal motion sickness during gameplay, although the cutscenes between different levels could cause some motion sickness, so some points are lost there. But an 8 out of 10 for motion sickness in this game, and that had a lot to do with the player movement. Using just simple teleportation and basic rotation during gameplay reduces motion sickness, but it doesn't take full advantage of what's possible. As a result, lower motion sickness, but less player movement. I guess there's some trade-offs there. For environment and immersion, we're giving this game a 6 out of 10. There's a lot of things that were right, but there are also a lot of things that were kind of disorienting and broke the immersion of this game. One of them being you're standing or sitting and your player, as you look down, is reclined in a spaceship. You move your arms, but the player's arms don't move in some of the cutscenes. It is disorienting in that regard, and it breaks the immersion. Now, the environment was very well done, and the graphics were really enjoyable, and the sound that went with those graphics really helped with the environment being an enjoyable place to be. But the immersion kept breaking because the way the story was being told and your movement within that story context was also disorienting and confusing. I wasn't sure why my hands would move at some times and they wouldn't at others. The free play was just not there, and so the immersion was broken. That's why we're giving a 6 out of 10 for environment and immersion. All right, so the overall score for Unearthing Mars 2 is a 6.3 out of 10. Now, there were a lot of high scores that this game got, but there was one really low score that pulled it down, and that was in the controllers area. Overall, we thought the game was really good, and we would encourage you to go try it out. Just make sure you're not playing it with the Valve Index. Make sure you're using a Vive, or it's available on PSVR or in the Steam store with any other Windows Mixed Reality headset. This has been 100 in 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you can receive a notification when we release another VR game review tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.